ドビデオ
You know, after the last video's,
いいだろう
unpleasantness, I think it's high time we go over to the lighter side of anime and discuss happier topics, lovelier topics, any topic that will wash the fetid taste of Wounded Man out of my mouth. So, to shake things up a bit, let's move away from the 80s and talk about another fascinating decade in anime history, the 90s. The 90s in anime history is truly a magical and fascinating time, a decade defined by drastic changes in both industry and character design standards, the decade that was signified by the surprise emergence of overseas markets, and most notably, the economic prosperity that led to the 80s golden age had gone bye-bye. As you would imagine, the downturn did affect the anime industry. Without the bubble economy, producers became reluctant to put money towards strange new OVAs for new directors to cut their teeth on. Unless you were an industry veteran who had proven success 10 times over, your budget was shoestring. At the same time, however, anime producers were also beginning to realize that the OVA format was not just a useful way to peddle content not up to broadcast standards and practices, but also as a means to test the waters for new anime without committing to a full television series. This treatment was usually reserved for anime that were either brand new original ideas, or adaptations of manga and light novels that had an audience, but not necessarily a huge Dragon Ball level audience. This is one of them.
Like a flash, the invincible slayer Dick Saucer is here!
Produced in 1992 by Victor Entertainment, Dragon Half is certainly an odd little duck of an anime. Adapted from a manga created by Ryusuke Mita, it was picked up by Victor Entertainment for an anime adaptation. The original plan going forward was to cover the first 2 arcs of the manga over the course of 4 episodes. That number was later reduced to 2, with Victor Entertainment citing, quote, lack of interest. The story focuses on Mink, the daughter of a human dragon slayer and an imperial red dragon. Mink is a hyperactive fangirl for teen pop sensation and legendary dragon slayer Dick Saucer. But because Saucer is a devoted slayer of dragons and because Mink is a dragon half, it's more likely that he would kill her rather than kiss her. And so begins a series of madcap misadventures to get the potion that can change Mink into a pure human. Among retro anime fans, Dragon Half was never seen as a huge anime, but neither an obscure one either. For me, Dragon Half felt like it has always existed in the background of anime fandom. Probably because Dragon Half has never been that difficult to find. The DVDs have always been readily available and affordable, and the entire OVA has been up on YouTube since 2007. You could show a person a clip of this anime and that might jog some vague memory of them watching it. So in order to fully delve into what makes Dragon Half work as a piece, we're going to have to discuss one of the more difficult genres to discuss, especially in the medium of anime. Comedy! Comedy is already a hard genre to examine. While you can break down and analyze a joke piece by piece, figuring out what makes that joke work or what doesn't make it work, it won't change the fact that comedy by nature is subjective. What some people find funny, others might not find funny. For example, Grown Ups 2 is by all means another terrible Adam Sandler vehicle in the long line of other terrible Adam Sandler vehicles. It is a broad, lazy, and cheap comedy. It is a film that relies solely on a celebrity cast who is phoning it in and phoning it in hard. It is so bottom of the barrel, Sandler is scraping the earth. Not only did it receive 7% on Rotten Tomatoes, it was also nominated for 9 Razzies at the 2014 Golden Raspberry Awards. And none of that stopped Grown Ups 2 from grossing roughly $247 million of its $80 million budget, outgrossing the far more well-received and more fondly remembered Pacific Rim, and netting Adam Sandler a Kids' Choice Award for Favorite Movie Actor. So no matter how bad a joke is told, there is always going to be at least one person who laughs. I call this the law of Family Guy. And the problem becomes twofold when you examine comedy from a foreign culture. Most humor tends to be deeply embedded in language and culture. In fact, modern theory suggests that some form of shared knowledge is one of the key foundations of humor. Therefore, jokes that originate in one culture will have difficulty translating to another. Japanese humor, for example, is often known for the way it plays with the Japanese language to form puns. Unless you speak, or at the very least are intimately familiar with the language, this joke won't sound funny to you. But it's not all just puns that Japanese humor is based around. There's also slapstick, satire, and parody. Slapstick is easier to cross cultural barriers because it is an entirely physical form of comedy. Satire and parody, on the other hand, relies almost entirely on having knowledge on Japanese culture. Gintama, for example, is a very popular comedy anime that utilizes both physical slapstick, wordplay, and parody to tell its jokes. Its appeal in the West is very niche, and fan subs of it often have to rely on notes to point out references not every American viewer would get. So how does Dragon Half handle its comedy? Dragon Half is, at its heart, a parody. The original manga was written around the time the game Dragon Quest was establishing the tropes associated with the fantasy and JRPG genres. At the same time, Japan had just gotten the official Japanese translation of Dungeons & Dragons, and the ensuing campaigns among creative types would end up inspiring a lot of anime, manga, light novels, and video games throughout the late 80s and 90s. But while most of the Gygax-inspired fantasy stories of the time began in earnest, Dragon Half was ahead of the curve in turning the whole dichotomy of heroic swordsmen slaying evil monsters on its head. Mink is the child of both a famous dragon slayer and the dragon her father was supposed to capture. In a more serious story, she could have been a tragic result of a forbidden romance relegated to a side character, or in a darker setting, a villain. But here, she is the protagonist, whether she knows it or not. Mink herself has a huge teen crush on Dick Saucer, the pretty new dragon slayer on the block who is portrayed not as a noble hero, but as a teen heartthrob.
Saucer, here I come to save the day.
The heroic swordsman is not treated as the hero, but as the prize at the end for our protagonist to claim. Subversion of Archetypes is the name of the game for Dragon Half. The evil lord who says he wants to kill Mink's father for not slaying Mink's mother? That's just a cover so he can date Mink's mom himself. The snobby, elegant princess who's competing for Saucer's affections with Mink and constantly brings up Mink's dragon half to put her down? She's a slime half of the lowliest monsters in the monster world. It even extends to Mink's friends/adventuring party, Lufa and Pia. You would expect Lufa, the elfin mage archetype, to be a stylish magic user, but she's actually quite crass and incompetent at her own magic. And you would expect Pia, the dwarven tank, to be a rough around the edges type who's raring for a fight, but she actually prefers to let her pet Mappy do the fighting and only wears her legendary armor due to overprotective parents. You would also think that the only person who's playing his character straight is Dick Saucer himself, but not really, no. While he certainly shows that he does take his job quite seriously, he seems to be more devoted to his singing career than actual monster slaying.
Huh? Oh, darn it! I'm supposed to be in a concert right now.
But in the manga, the parody aspects of Dragon Half are more there to give the story a unique hook. Despite having its tongue squarely in its cheek for most of the time, the comedy will occasionally take a step back to benefit the action or the drama of the story. It is a comedy 9 out of 10 times. Dragon Half the anime, on the other hand, is all comedy, all the time. It's kinda hard to believe that the creators turned an already wacky manga even wackier, but they did it. Mostly the jokes that are used for the anime are adapted from the manga, but they aren't afraid to add their own gags as well. For example, there's a scene where the evil lord is talking to his court sorcerer who emerges in a cloud of what appears to be smoke. After they exchange exposition and dialogue, the court sorcerer walks out of the room, picking up and taking a bucket of dry ice with him. That is a good visual joke. Though the effect of the punchline is diminished by the fact that when the sorcerer enters the room, we get a quick cut to the bucket of dry ice with the words dry ice labeled clearly on the side. But the overall comedy is helped by the animation. You've noticed by now that barely anyone in this anime appears to be fully on model, and tends to look more like the little anime doodles you used to draw on the side of your homework during middle school. That's because both this anime and the manga made liberal usage of the super deformed style. Super deformed style is a commonly used anime trope where the style of the anime briefly switches to make the characters have small, almost babyish forms with big eyes and small limbs. This is used in anime as either a ways to emphasize the overall goofiness of a scene or the immaturity of the character, and both of these can be applied to Dragon Half. In most anime, this would be seen as incredibly annoying, or even tonally dissonant at times, but since Dragon Half is established as an adaptation where nothing is to be taken seriously, I think it ultimately works. Super deformed style has also been used as a means to cheaply animate comedy moments because there's less pressure to stay on model. And that is employed here, but not to a point where it actively harms the comedy. The animators know where to use their budget, asking themselves, would this scene be funnier if this character was doing a smoothly animated dance, or would this scene be funnier if this cell bumped into this other cell? The voice acting also lends itself to the comedy because both Japanese and English voice actors are playing it up to the rafters. This is way more evident in the English dub done by ADV. Say what you will about those Texans, they are a lot of things, but they are certainly not wooden.
Stop it! Go away! I'm a king, you know! If you come any closer, I'll cry!
While Kotono Mitsuishi does a great job at playing up Mink's cuteness and snippiness, the dub really adds another layer to her by making her an unstable ball of energy. And this is all thanks to, well, I'll let you guess.
Think of that!
That fly will grow on him! Please take me, Lord, if I
Yep, it's Excel herself, Jessica Calvello. It's a wonder she's not blowing out that mic because she is devouring the cell paintings in this anime.
What? No way! He tricked me! That dirty old man! He's toast!
Even her internal monologues are chock full of ham.
Wait! Whoever lost this ticket must be a big Dick Saucer fan just like me! And if I take it, she'll be crushed! I have to leave it here!
And I think it works because Mink, after all, is not an adventurer, but an airheaded fangirl. She's in the throes of a hot and heavy unrequited romance that affects thousands of Tiger Beat readers a day.
I can't believe this! I've wanted to meet you for so long, Mr. Saucer!
Come on!
Another voice actress of note would be Amanda Wynn Lee as Princess Vina.
Tell me, was this old man balder than a baboon's ass with a face like a squashed frog?
She can make reciting a tragic backstory sound absolutely haughty, and can easily turn from snooty princess to spoiled valley girl on a dime.
Mink has stolen a kiss from my precious saucer and she must pay. She is my enemy, father.
But the real star is the tragically underrated Brent Weaver as the king's dumb muscle, Damaramu.
How regretful it is indeed that even in his perfection, the mighty Damaramu cannot overcome the pangs of hunger in his mighty belly.
He is giving it his all in making this complete moron of a soldier sound like the most capable, hot-blooded badass. He is like Zap Brannigan of Dungeons & Dragons inspired anime. It's amazing.
How dare you, wench! You have committed a grievous sin! From that sneaky and treacherous blow, my mighty brain lost 100,003 cells!
It all helps the pacing of the rapid-fire comedy that is at play here feel a lot more natural. Nearly every scene here is either a punchline or a setup to a punchline. That rule applies to both dramatic and action scenes. Princess Vina's melodramatic but ultimately rather silly backstory is all set up to make a delicious fourth wall breaking joke.
It's only fair that a girl with such a painful past be rewarded for her suffering with someone perfect like Dick Saucer.
And as for action scenes, they are either completely one-sided or just over in a matter of seconds.
So far, only 7 people have passed this year. Can you beat him with your skinny arms? Can you, little girl? Ready, go! Hey, if you will just step this way, please.
And the reason they chose this direction is not to just parody a parody, but also out of simple necessity. I did mention in the last video that a common problem among OVA adaptations is the want to compress a lot of story, sometimes entire volumes of story, into 2 to 6 episode anime. They would take a story, go over all the important plot details, trim the fat, and see if by some miracle a cohesive story could form. One has to imagine the amount of pressure mounting for staff as the 4 episodes they were given to adapt to story arcs suddenly got cut down to 2. Dragon Half ended up being a compression of a compression, and you better believe a lot of story important stuff got cut. First, the characters of Lufa's and Pia's parents get cut entirely. Also, Lufa owns Erwan and Pia owns Maffy from the beginning of their journey, whereas in the manga they both acquire those things along the way. Heck, they even slightly toned down the fan service, which was a huge initial selling point for the comic.
Oh, what a blow to me!
Oh, let me see.
I hope he doesn't stop there!
I saw something's goodies!
The key word being slightly. But the biggest, and I mean the biggest thing that is removed from the story is the character of Azedodeth, the main antagonist. In the anime, Mink and her friends set out to find the potion that will turn her into a human. It just seems like they are wandering aimlessly and just searching for it without any direction. In the manga, however, the potion has a clear location in Azedodeth's castle. Azedodeth is both a powerful demon and an evil warlock known across the world. So Mink would essentially have to face off the devil just so she could get that potion. And being the main source of the conflict of the story, he is removed entirely. But it works out thanks to one thing. They make a joke out of it. Okay, let me explain. In the second episode, centered around a tournament arc, a powerful child mage by the name of Doug Finn is facing Mink in the finals, and goes on this great spiel about how he is the son of Azedodeth and how he will take care of Mink now that she has been locked on in his father's crosshairs. And Mink has no idea what he's talking about.
Don't lie to me! I know for a fact that you said you were going to kill my father, Azedodeth!
What are you talking about? I've never even heard of Azedodeth until just now!
And the jokes get better when Doug gets a VHS copy of Dragon Half and finds out that every scene involving him and his father has been left on the cutting room floor. Such a wonderfully absurd piece of meta humor that was, for its time, quite novel. And I think that's what makes Dragon Half so special. A comedy like Dragon Half might have actually felt very new at the time. Its willingness to not only help parody the fantasy tropes along with its namesake manga, but also its willingness to poke fun at the fact that it's a compressed adaptation, give it a very fresh feel. It's a comedy that refuses to be nailed down. It barely gives itself time to breathe in the way it wants to cram nearly every joke under the sun in such a short time. One could even consider that Dragon Half served as the inspiration for other wacky comedies in the future. That being said, remember how I said comedy is subjective? While I myself find Dragon Half to be both funny and engaging, its brand of comedy might feel disorienting to some, grating even. Given the fact that the anime is trying for laughs per millisecond, some people might not like Dragon Half not giving itself room to breathe. And that problem could be doubled with the English dub. Jessica Calvello can play an annoying fangirl a little too well after all. But despite its hyperactive pace, its indulgence and wackiness, and the suspicion that Victor Entertainment barely cares that this anime exists, there is still a lot of heart put into the story of a flighty Dragon Half trying to appease her out-of-her-league celebrity crush. It's just relentlessly lighthearted and does not want to let up on it. You can almost say there's a hint of innocence about it.
Roshi, come over here, big boy.
Well, you get the idea. Dragon Half is not here to tell a story with some jokes in between. It is here for the jokes and the jokes alone. It's a simple comedy anime. It wants to be happy, and for you to be happy along with it.